hello there, stranger. Now, don't touch that dial. You've tuned in to Neon Static, where every Tuesday, you get one true, original scary story you won't hear anywhere else. I'm your host, Vi, and maybe these chills will help you beat this unrelenting summer heat. Because tonight's story, well, it's close to home. Maybe close to your home. Like the house next door. Say, your neighbors, they're on vacation, right? I mean, even in this, the age of home surveillance and cameras, they can stop the mail, but who can stop whoever's tossing those free newspapers onto your lawn? The ones that bleach in the sun or are returned to pulp by the sprinklers. That's a tell. Yes, there's just a sense of an empty house. Same gut instinct our ancestors used to avoid caves that had, other occupants, of the grisly variety. So yeah, you've noticed that empty house. But maybe you're not the only one who has. This is story 119, and here's what happened. Full moons are when the crazies come out. Full moons on or near Halloween. You had guys in the precinct who didn't even bother going to Christmas Mass, suddenly crossing themselves. I even had to dodge an awkward attempt at a group prayer thing before the start of my shift. It's not that I hadn't seen some weird stuff out on the beat. Quite the contrary. If the guys there only knew, or noticed, they'd have clocked that I was one of the more superstitious officers working. But I dealt with it with routine. Little things that I did the exact same way every shift. Down to the places I'd stop, the foods or drinks I'd pick up for lunch, or the medal that I wore ritually, if not religiously, under my undershirt. Their little half-hearted attempt at a group hug with some mumbled words to St. Christopher, well, that wasn't part of my routine. So I waited in the car for my partner, Ross, to come shambling out and get in, and we could begin the same beat that we'd been driving for nearly a year. We'd head out to the very edge of our patrol, and then work our way in, winding carefully through the streets and suburbs, crawling along slow enough so that the good citizens of our town could look outside and see the car slide through the night, see the faces lit up by the cluster of radio equipment glowing blue, and know that we were there, watching over them. Ross was usually affable, but I guess the night had him on edge. We'd only crawled 2 streets before he asked why we always drove the exact same way. I thought about keying him in on how, like compulsion, I craved routine. How it was my own weird little belief system that if I went the same way, ate the same meal, then that the night would end the same, both of us above ground and breathing. But in the blue glow, his eyes were hectic, goggling left and right, from me to the windshield to the world beyond it. So I gave him the other reason, and the lesson for the rookie cop for the night. My pet theory on habituation. I asked him, "Ross, your mom ever have you help her clean?" He turned to me at once, saying no, he'd grown up with 3 sisters. I continued anyway, saying, well, maybe you heard her say something like, a place for everything, and everything in its place. He nodded. I continued. Your mom, if she was anything like my mom, well, she figured out a place to keep every little thing, and then, by God, she kept things there. And you had better too, if you didn't want to tick off the old man. I looked to him to see if he was following. His eyes were on me, and no longer twitching back and forth towards the street. Good. So when you're habituated, you get used to the certain way things look, the place you find things. Then you notice real quick when something's not where it should be. He responded this time, saying, then it's like we do things the same way every time, so when something's off we can tell. I smiled. Very good, Grasshopper. You're tuned in to what should be, so it trips your alarm when you see something that shouldn't. we finished together. I checked left and right, then made the next turn. It may seem boring or stuck in my ways, but one day you'll... But I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't remember what I was even saying. We turned onto another dark street. Cars beetled along the sidewalk, parked and asleep for the night. This was an older neighborhood, one that the city had annexed long ago, yet hadn't made good on the promise of streetlights. Instinct drove my hand forward to hit the high beams. This startled Ross, who turned, his raised eyebrows already asking the question before his mouth could. What is it? I shushed him. Not that I was hearing anything, but much like you turn down the radio when you're looking for something, pulling the distraction of your ears to free up energy for your eyes. Redirect power to the thrusters, I thought. But under that little pop culture reference was a drum beat. My heartbeat. It was quickening, because my senses, my instinct, the habituation of how this neighborhood should sound, should look, should feel. It was telling me something was different. Someone hadn't replaced the Scotch tape. There was a drawer hanging ajar, accusatory, demanding its tape back. Ross shut up, thanks be to God. I cut our speed to a turtling 5 miles per hour, just letting the pull of the engine draw us forward, inch by inch. My head swiveled. I felt the air shift as Ross did the same, copying my movement, studying each house we passed. There was something different here. The air was different, displaced by something that was missing. Or... My eyes alighted on a little house that in daylight was a faded peach, a simple 2-bed job that sulked on its lot, surrounded by the same turf as all the adjoining houses. Or something that's there that shouldn't be. I stopped the car and reached outside to cant the additional headlight around. It moved freely on its joint, allowing me to swing the light across the peach house's bland, expressionless face. It glanced off the windows, but there was no movement within. The front gate was latched. The garage door was down. It huddled like a bird on a wire, blending in with all the other little birdies on this street. But it didn't blend. There was something. 4, maybe 5 days. Ross's voice faded in, like a radio being turned up in another room. I turned back to him, asking him, "What?" His body was turned towards me, towards the peach house. I said they must be on vacation. Have to have been gone about 4 or 5 days from the mail and the papers. I turned back, eyeing the porch. As Ross had noted, there was visible mail stuck through the slot on their front door. The white envelopes gave the door a strange set of buck teeth. On the porch and right before it were 2 of those rolled-up newspapers. Not real newspapers. They were things like swap sheets or penny savers that local businesses paid some little print shop in town to crowd with their coupons and litter across people's yards. "See," he continued, "I got 2 of them this week. 1 Monday and 1 today. That's 4 days. They're probably out of town. Someplace where the heat isn't. Lucky stiffs." "Yeah. Good catch," I admitted, then flicked the additional headlight back to face the street. Ross was right. All the indicators of a family gone on vacation. That would explain that jangly, certain feeling I'd had at the head of the street. I dropped the high beams back to normal and resumed cruising along, all according to plan. And the plan dictated that, next, we would take a left and amble out of this neighborhood, heading east to the new subdivision. That one had streetlights. The first street, Baker Way, would be well lit. We made it to the end of the street where I should turn left. I pulled a U-ey. I headed back down the dark street, because damn it, no, Ross wasn't right. It wasn't something that was missing. It was something that was there, that should not be there. And as I pulled up alongside the curb in front of the peach house, I heard the sound of a shotgun racking. Surprised, I whipped my head right to see the rook holding the shotgun we brought along for contingencies. His face was grim, and he nodded at me. "You're right. I feel it too. That nod, that gun, told me not only was he on my wavelength, already understanding that even if it didn't look off, something was off. Well, he was ready to march in behind me and back up his partner on that hunch. He may have been green, but his instincts were coming in blue. Right. I called into dispatch, giving the address and getting a board sounding, "Copy, George 2-4. I checked my belt, then opened the car door and swung myself out, hearing Ross do the same behind me. I had my flashlight out, and with Ross backing me up, we walked up to the door and gave it a hearty 1-2 knock. Nothing. I called out, "Police, open up," and knocked again, but there was still nothing. They didn't have proper curtains, but shears, and they didn't conceal much when my flashlight cut through their filmy fabric. Beyond them, I saw a standard living room, gray and mustard with herringbone patterns. No movement, stale, asleep. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the old instinct is throwing a false positive. I banged again on the door, then looked at Ross. Ross was already stepping backwards, looking left, then right. His eyes widened, and he cut them to me. Side yard gate. Looks ajar. Damn it. I pulled my sidearm, then continued. Flashlight held overhand in my left, service revolver in my right. We approached the gate, and I towed it. It whined, then swung open. The latch was undone. I shone my light along the ground, tracing the footprint of the house's foundation. Flower beds, empty, the dirt baked to clay in this unseasonable heat. Some gravel, larger rocks, a clutch of dirty brown leaves. And then, just beyond, something glinting back. Shiny, crackled, many-edged. A couple of shards of glass. My flashlight beam drew up, to the window above the glass. Sure enough, a blue curtain was flapping out of the dark recess of the broken window. They must have left a fan on, because in this still night, that curtain was waggling itself at me like a tongue. Nya, 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 nya. I looked back to Ross. His face was stone, but a glance at his hands revealed his white knuckles. Then told him, with me, and we crept along the side of the house towards the window, pausing before it. Careful not to step on the glass, break the evidence further. An eye roll. Those CSI dweebs were always on us about preserving evidence. My eyes cut to the pile of rocks and gravel a few feet away. Didn't need a microscope to figure this one out. Still, I leaned cautiously as I shot my flashlight beam into the room. Every nerve ending was standing at attention, and that gut instinct was pumping too much, making my stomach roil, telling me something was here that shouldn't be. And whatever it was dangerous. My flashlight illuminated the bedroom. Red bookshelf, a crowd of plastic toys, a desk with a backpack zipped open, its contents strewn like a sick kid that rolls over the side of the bed and throws up. My eyes and my flashlight traced the avalanche of toys and books and loose paper down to the floor, where I could just make out a pile, a shape, something. Runner! I jolted, wheeled around as I felt the ground shake. Ross was already clod-hopping it back through the gate. Beyond him, I could just make out the form of a man, running for all he was worth down the street. I felt the crunch of glass as I pushed off my right foot. CSI nerds be damned, most of the glass would be inside the room anyway, and I was running behind my partner. The gear we wore was heavy. The swing of equipment on my belt banged into my legs, but the sprint didn't last long. As we cleared the fence and made it onto the street, a flashing of red and blue lit up the night. Another car. Petrovsky and Bulliard. Well, they were slung across the street, and Petrovsky, the Mad Russian as he was known, had the runner, a lean man whose eyes flicked and glittered like a wild animal's, up against the car, hands already angled to receive handcuffs. Heard you boys on the radio. Thought we'd swing by, see if it was a trick or a treat. Bulliard had his hands on his belt, leaning back against the weight. He tossed a glance backwards as Petrovsky cursed, or maybe said bless you, the man's accent was thick enough to cover the distance. And deadpan, Bulliard added, trick, I guess. We secured the house. The guy was layering in there. He'd sensed what I'd sensed, an empty house, and decided to take up residence. A squatter, bad enough. But what my flashlight had exposed was his nest. A nest created from all the blankets off the other bed in the house. The parents' room. Instead of just sleeping in the master, he'd piled and arranged them on the floor of the kids' room. The only kids' room, a young boy's. That was a choice, and that gave me a chill that I shoved down immediately. Ross was with me in the room, and he let out a disgusted grunt. Sickos, man. Imagine if he'd planned to surprise them when they got back, not just use the place like his own private Airbnb. I was arguing with my instincts, but speaking to Ross as I said. Or maybe he broke into this room, felt it safest being near his exit. Or, well, you saw him. Think he's got all his toys in the attic? Maybe he liked the kid stuff. Parents' room felt, I don't know, authoritarian. I mean, I'm no brain doc, but it sounded right. Except that, of course, it wasn't. Petrovsky was waiting by the car when we returned, having given the house over to the crime scene unit that rolled up. Ross and I made our way back over to him. He looked up, then jerked his head back to the car. Might want to take the long way back to the department. Get lost for a few hours with this one. Alarmed, Ross blurted out, "You have a weapon?" Bulliard wandered up, holding the bag of stuff frisked off the twitchy man in the back of the patrol car. Worse. Take a look. Neither of us wanted to, but both of us did angle our heads, leaning way over, avoiding coming near to the bag like it glowed with radiation, and both of us saw what was crumpled over itself in the bottom of the bag, covered in cheery cartoon characters. "Don't quote me," Bulliard said, shaking the bag, "but I don't think those are his size." Full moons and Halloween bring out the weirdos. Every department will have a sudden revival when they coincide. I'd scoffed at their Johnny-come-lately newfound belief. But as a believer myself, I'd be remiss not to note that in that scrambled group prayer circle, my partner, Ross, had stood next to Petrovsky and Bulliard, and maybe that gave us an edge. On a full moon Halloween, I'll take any edge I can get. That was story 119, and I needed a lot more hand sanitizer to get through it than most. But if it makes any of you take extra care in securing your homes before you go on vacation, I suppose that makes it well worth it. If you'd like to reach out, email and social media are in the description. I know I've been super bad at Instagram. I'll get better. If you don't want to wander off platform, likes, comments, and subscription are options right here on YouTube, and I appreciate each and every one of you that takes the time to do so. But it's never necessary. I'm just so delighted you tuned in today, and hopefully, I'll be seeing you again next week. Same bat time, same bat channel, for another scary story. Until then, take care, strangers.